And welcome to another interview brought to you by AIChE's online community, Connected. My name is Ian Glasgow, and I work as a process technologist at AIChE, the International Alliance Group, and this year I am the Refinery Topical Chair and the F&PD Welcome Session Chair. And I'm here with the AIChE Spring Meeting Global Congress Process Safety, speaking with Clair Cagnolatti, who's the Vice President of Chemical Studies at HSB Solomon Associates. Claire is the President of the Chemical Studies at Solomon, which is based out of Dallas, Texas, and she's been there for 23 years. This is after 14 years of hands-on manufacturing experience and 4 years working on economic optimization at plant and corporate levels in the chemical and petrochemical manufacturing industries. Solomon is the group that everyone recognizes as a benchmarking service to provide performance improvement, and they do this for companies in over 70 countries in the refining, chemical, power generation, pipeline, and terminal industries. And Claire was our Fuels Petrochemical Keynote speaker this year. Claire, welcome.
Thank you.
Claire, the title of your talk was The Energy Industry Trends and Insights from the Wellhead to Downstream Products. And we actually speak how Solomon consultants have examined these trends and shared the insights learned from the data-driven CPA and all the energy-related industries, from the wellhead all the way to the downstream derivative products, both on the refining side and the chemical side, and all the stages in between. So can you tell us a bit about how these benchmarking studies help foster continuous improvement needed for the companies so that they can remain competitive in a very difficult industry we're in today?
Yes, that's one of the best things about benchmarking. Lee Solomon had a very famous quote, at least famous to those of us that worked with him, which was, you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you're not measuring it, I guarantee, you may think you're managing it, but I guarantee you're not managing it. So it simply lets you know where you stand in the industry. It's not about always being the best, because some plants that are older and smaller have certain inefficiencies. There is a way to see in the Solomon study if you're being efficient, though, for what you have to work with. So it's not to be first quartile in everything. I don't think there's any company, refinery, plant that's been first quartile in every single one of our benchmarks. That would be very, very rare. Instead, it's about being the best you can be with what you have to work with.
Now you have terms like you call gap analysis or closing the gap, and they're used by several different consultants. And a lot of them say that they can calculate the performance gap, but you have to wonder, what's the accuracy basis of those gaps? So you mentioned in Solomon, you look at your gap analysis too, and as part of the deliverables of your major study. So can you explain what makes your gap analysis different?
Very good question. Our gap analysis is based on a huge database of actual operating data. And the easiest way to say the answer to that question is we know what good looks like because we have our database. We can rank on any number of variables. We also know how much each of these different performance areas yields, utilization or reliability, cost like maintenance cost, how each of these things contribute to that margin gap. We know what the best performers in the world are, and that's who we use for our gap analysis. We find a very small subgroup of plants or refineries or sites, whatever study we're looking into, and we find out what they do and how they perform, and everyone else, all the other facilities in the study are compared to these best performers. In the refinery study, they call this pace setters. In the olefin study, in the petrochemicals area, we call them high-performing plants. And we know that they're good at everything, and that's sort of how we pick them. Nobody's first quartile in everything, but they're good first or second quartile in each major category of competitive measures, or KPIs, the key performance indicators. And because we use this data-driven idea of gap, we know we can calculate the gaps in performance against this high-performing group. We can calculate it very accurately. And we also make sure that there's no double counting. Using statistics and inference and using what the data tells us, we can, for example, determine how much of a yield gap in a cracker is due to not making the yields in the furnaces versus losing some of it in the separation train or having some flaring incidents. There's really no way, if you're estimating, to really know what those are. But we know what those numbers represent, and we can get into details a lot more because, again, we're data-driven.
Right. Now, in your presentation, you show how Solomon uses those proprietary methods for new and startup benchmarking studies, and they're always looking to grow your opportunities, look at other opportunities, other areas. So can you explain how that process works and what are the common factors for these different manufacturing industries, and what these similar methodologies you use across the industry?
Yeah, when we want to start up a new study, it's either our idea or one of our consultants has an idea to start a new study, or in some cases we actually get a request from a group of manufacturers. The PDH study is an example. That one came from the Solomon side because we already do an olefin study, and PDH units make propylene, which is an olefin product. We thought it just fell naturally to come into that. And some of the other studies where, for example, the underground storage study that's part of our midstream offering. The underground storage study, it was companies that operate these underground hydrocarbon storage facilities came to us and said, well, you're doing pipelines and terminals, could you do underground storage? And so we launched our underground storage at the request, or we knew that there was some demand for that type of thing because it came from the actual sites themselves. And the way that we can do all of this is we look at what predicts consumption of resources, be it energy, work hours, operating expense, and other, whether it be like processed chemicals or other types of things that you consume. Consumption of resources also is indicative of how complex the unit is. If it takes more resources, it's a more complex unit. Mm-hmm. And that allows us to have this equalizing divisor that's based not only on the size, but also on the complexity. And we use the data in the database to derive those numbers. We also use the data in the database to predict energy consumption, so we can have an energy index. And those things are really universal. The concepts of complexity and predicted energy can be really applied to any industry. We have some data, we apply statistics to it to find out what the relationships are between the complexity and the consumption of resources, and we can apply it anywhere.
So, well, if for everyone in our audience and who's able to attend the presentation today, what is really the key point that you really want the audience to take away?
The key point, and I made it towards the end of the presentation, is that the high performers, the best performers in whatever industry we may look at, they do not have the smallest number of people. People is an asset that is sometimes undervalued because it's a cost to the manufacturing site or to the refinery or to the midstream operator. It's a cost, and unfortunately sometimes the only thing that operations managers or site managers have at their disposal is to cut costs. That's the wrong thing to do if you want to optimize margins in the long run and have sustainable high performance. In order to do that, you need good people. You need skilled engineers, craftspeople, managers, supervisors. You need a very good team of people. And if the people are nothing more than an expense that you can, cut 15% right off the top, that's very short-sighted. The managers, the management of all these sites need to have responsibility for gross margin, meaning if they lose production due to unreliability, if they are not achieving the yields that they should be achieving, if there are any other operational type of issues, and maybe they don't have the right people, or they cut people to where some of the more experienced engineers and craftspeople are no longer there, it's going to cost you in the long run. So your labor pool, your work hours should be optimized, never minimized.
Well, I've been speaking today here with Clair Cagnolatti from HSB Solomon, and thank you very much for being part of this interview series with Connected, and thank you for being part of the AIChE community out there.
Thank you very much.